Hey there, sci-fi fans! Welcome to Dark Loops, where creative and scholarly nerds discuss HBO's award-winning series Westworld and ponder the eternal question, what does it mean to be human? Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dark Loops Westworld. In this podcast, we discuss Westworld Season 3, Episode 3, The Absence of Field. I'm your host, Dr. Scott Jordan, cognitive psychologist, philosopher from Illinois State University. Joining me on the podcast are two highly informed school psychologists, Dr. Leandra Paris and Dr. Tara Rains. Leandra and Tara, please say hi, state your affiliation, and tell us the best thing that happened to you this week.
So I'm Leandra Paris. I'm at William and Mary in Virginia. And the best thing that happened to me this week is my husband found paper towels. That is something that we have not had in any of our local stores for weeks. And we were down to our last roll. And he saved the day and managed to get us some more. So that was probably the best thing.
That's fantastic. Terribly important these days. How about you, Tara?
Hey, my name is Tara Rains, and I am faculty at the University of Denver. And the best thing that happened to me this week was I have a cousin who has started working for Instacart since she got laid off. She did my grocery run for me, which was an amazing, delightful surprise because the Instacart wait list was 4 days, and she was able to do my shopping for me while she was on another run. So I don't know. I hope that's legal because I'm saying it, but it was definitely the best thing that happened to me this week.
Very kind person indeed. I don't know if I can compete with nice people kind of stories. But I have to say, given that we're all in the same house again for a while, the coolest thing that happened to me this week is I've connected again musically with my kids. They get sick of me trying to get into their world and listen to their music. But my oldest is 21. She's a huge BTS fan. I don't know if you guys know about BTS, but my God, it's like someone took 7 Michael Jacksons and they all dance to say it's an amazing group. And their last album, their most recent album is called 7. And I got to tell you, the lyrics coming out of these 21-year-olds is just, or I'm assuming that age, off the hook, amazing. And I strongly recommend everybody go to YouTube and check out the BTS Black Swan Live on James Corden. It is some of the most amazing dancing I've ever seen. And yes, I'm boy banding on what people want to call a boy band. But my daughter sent me a video for Black Swan. It was a dance bit, not by the band, but by a dance company. And I wrote back to her, I looked at the lyrics and I said, if you want to understand me, just read the lyrics to this song. And then my youngest is listening to All Time Low's latest album, Wake Up Sunshine. I listened to that and I liked it quite a bit. So, and they're bringing these things to me to listen to. Guys at my age, but my kids' age, that's just totally cool. So those were good things that happened to me.
I love it.
No, thank
you.
you.
Have you all been watching any of these Instagram concerts and DJs?
Yes, they've been a lot of fun. Yeah. That's the only time I get on Instagram, by the way. Like, I don't post anything. I don't get on there, but I do get on there for that.
Yeah, they've been fantastic.
I have to admit, I have been watching this guy, Jamal at Jamal, on YouTube. He does reactions to songs, and he got stuck on Steely Dan about a month ago. And he had heard all these Steely Dan songs at the soundtrack at work, but he never knew it was Steely Dan. And having him react to these songs for the first time, hearing the whole thing, I mean, I grew up on that stuff. That was my gateway drug to good jazz, right? So before we begin discussing the episode, I want to let the listeners know that in the About section of the Dark Loops Productions YouTube channel, that's in the About section, you can find links to papers the three of us have published regarding the work we do as psychologists. So I personally have 2 links I posted. One is for a paper called The Wild Ways of Conscious Will. And that's a paper I published probably in 2013, to be honest, but before this show aired. But the idea of loops, living in multiple loops, and the idea of identity ultimately being loops was basically the point of that paper. And then another paper is a song I wrote for a philosopher. The paper is called It's Hard Work Being No One. And it's kind of relevant to this episode with people struggling for identity. So Tara and Leandra, what papers did you choose to post, and how are they related in any way to Westworld?
The paper that I chose is actually about bullying. So a lot of the stuff that I put out is in relation to like peer relationships, both friendships and romantic relationships and things like that. But the one I chose is about coping and kind of like how self-reliance really ties into the different ways that we cope when we experience conflict with others, and how that relates to victimization and perpetration and stuff like that. So the reason I chose that one is because this is one of those where we found findings that really surprised me, that youth who use strategies that we consider to be pro-social, like constructive strategies, so telling someone, problem solving and all of that, was actually associated with more frequent victimization. So, I mean, it's all a correlation, right? Like it's not longitudinal. So I can't say like, oh, you're more victimized, so you use more constructive coping, or you use more constructive coping and then you're more victimized. But I wasn't expecting that, because historically you would think that students who cope in the ways that we tell them to, like tell a teacher and reach out, would experience less victimization and less negative outcomes. And we found the opposite. And not in this paper, but someone can reach out if they want it. We do have another where we did show that youth who use constructive coping have more negative outcomes. And I think it relates to this because what we see a lot in Westworld are people doing what they're told to do and it not working out for them. And kind of trying to problem solve. And I think a good example is Caleb, where he's playing the system the way he's being told to. He's doing everything right. He's doing everything that, coping the way that I think the system would have him cope. And yet it's still not working out for him. So that's it.
Oh, thank you very much. Tara, how about you?
So the paper I selected is about school-based pathways to juvenile justice. And I picked this one because, and as we'll talk a little bit about in a minute, specifically with this episode, there are ways in which we have structures in place that place kids and place individuals on certain trajectories and certain tracks. And while it's not, a big digital algorithm, there are definitely practices that we engage in, particularly in education systems, that criminalize kids and put them on a specific path and lead to certain life outcomes. And so that paper just talks a little bit about some of the ways in which schools are participating in tracking students, and some ways that we can combat this systematic, oppressive mechanism.
Man, well, yeah, it's fantastic. And given what I know about your expertise, I almost tried to guess what your peace of mind would be in this episode. There's one scene that just screamed terror to me. So if we get there and I was correct, I'm not going to guess in public. So we'll go ahead and go from there. So
I probably missed it.
Oh, no. I think it's near the end when she's on when Dolores is on the bridge with Caleb.
Yeah.
Right? And she says, this,
I said the same thing. I'm like, that's going to be Tara's. Yeah.
That's awesome.
You got it.
So in scene one, very brief, we're back at the last night of Westworld, and Charlotte's leaving a message for someone she calls Nathan. We then see Charlotte's host being made in the non-Westworld world, or is it Charlotte? And I think that becomes one of the tensions of the show.
I was a little confused by that because I thought that the Charlotte robot was made on Westworld because it exited with the consciousnesses, or the balls, right? With the minds in her
purse.
Thing
is, I think that was Dolores.
That's inside of Charlotte's body. Right.
In Charlotte's body, exactly, yes.
Right. So I was confused as to why there was this other Charlotte body being made. Unless, I guess they did like several replicas. Like I'm not sure. Like that part was a sticking point for me. No,
well, there were many times when there were many Dolores Charlotte scenes this episode where whose mind ball is that? Right. Like who is that, quote unquote, really? And
yeah, I have lots of guesses about that.
That's the thing. Exactly. So because I have these little things in here where I say, so who is this now? So for example, Charlotte's body is made, and then Dolores and Charlotte are having a conversation. Charlotte seems rather upset. Who am I? And Dolores says, "You're a creature of beauty and power. Remember who you are." And then Charlotte says, "I remember who I am." And then Dolores says, "Good." But Charlotte is crying, right? So did you have a guess as to whose mind ball was in Charlotte at that moment? At that moment. All right, because I had a guess, and I think I kept the same guess all the way through. But I'll let you guys go first.
Okay, Leandra, you go.
Okay, so at this point in the show, I thought it was Clementine, who is the other prostitute that works under Maeve. But then later I changed my mind. But at this moment that we're talking about right now, I thought it was Clementine.
Okay. I thought it was Teddy. I considered Clementine, and the reason, can I tell you why I debunked it and didn't think it was Clementine?
Yeah.
Because they ruined her mind ball when they had her ride through at the end. Because for like a millisecond, I was like, oh, that makes sense that it would be her. And then I was like, no, because she got ruined.
That makes sense. And that makes what we hear later. Because like later, I definitely was like, oh, no, that can't be Clementine based on like other stuff, right? And so, but in this moment, that's who I thought it was. Or, you know, like you said, Tara, Teddy, like that was kind of going into it. I assumed it was Teddy.
Yeah.
I
assumed it was Teddy.
I have to admit, I thought it was Teddy. The crying, particularly at seeing Dolores again after what she did. This is not his world, and she's not who he thought she was. But believe me, it's not like I knew. I had a sneaking suspicion. And then Dolores says to Charlotte, "Now I'm going to show you who you need to pretend to be." She gives her a mirror. And this is true double consciousness, right? This is almost triple consciousness. All right, you got someone in Charlotte's body who believes let's just for the moment hypothesize Teddy, looking in a mirror, seeing herself, being told by Dolores who she's got to believe she is. I mean, I don't know if you guys paused. So wait a minute, let me sort this out. Who's who? What's going on here? But that's
especially if it is Teddy, because his entire identity has been male up to this point, and now he's in a female. You know what I mean? So like, there was a little bit of me that was like, this is going to be interesting if they put into play that relationship between having a masculine identity and then having to adopt more feminine one. So anyway, it was a mind trip for me.
It totally was. And then Charlotte says, "Charlotte tried to kill us all. Why must I be her?" And why the heck did you bring Bernard's mind ball with you? He tried to stop us too, right? I mean, she has those reactions. And here's a question for us to quickly discuss. Why is Bernard's mind marble, what we learn later is properly referred to as a pearl in host parlance, so different looking, so sparkly, or to turn a firefly phrase, so shiny? Do you guys notice Bernard's pearl was
I noticed it was different,
more diverse in color than the others?
I assumed it's because it was an original, like the first pearl. Was my thought, was that one of the first things that Ford did was build himself a partner. So my thought was it was so early, and that's why it had like the different kind of colors and
right. And go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I kind of had that thought, or it's that it's one of the only ones that's based on a real person, and part of that involved a different process of creating it. You know, like, as far as I can tell, he's the only one that we know may include the consciousness or memories or what have you of an actual real life person.
I thought it was just because he was a groovier guy than the rest of them, right? So you got to have some sparkle in there. I also thought his inability to settle into a self seems to pop up in the inability of the pearl to sort of settle into a color, if you like. Whereas the others, they were all pretty, standard, the color they were. I just love how they just let it go by. Of course, they made it clear you had to see the three of them first, and then you got to see his. So, look at this difference. But it was still pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so the next scene, Rehoboam notices Charlotte at Delos. She's cool, calm, and collected. Charlotte inspects a new Transformers model riot control bot. Her assistant reveals Delos has been secretly bought out slowly over the past couple of decades. Charlotte scratches herself, makes a desperate call to someone. What are your reactions to that scene?
So I have to be perfectly honest. My reaction to that whole first Charlotte scene, I was really impressed that they cast a pregnant woman.
Mm-hmm.
So that
yes, I was gonna say my first reaction was like,
you don't see that, and to me, I think, I don't know, I was thinking maybe the casting people were trying to get at the fact that, you know, like humanity is continuing. Like, was it a deliberate casting of a visibly pregnant woman? The other piece of that, where she's hurting her, it looks like she's trying to pull out the port almost. And I was wondering if there was some type of conflict happening. Like, did anyone read Stephanie, the host?
No, I didn't.
I did, yeah. Actually, this is very reminiscent of that.
Yeah, it made me think of The Host immediately, where there's this like alien consciousness competing with the human consciousness inside this one person's body.
Yeah, and I think that is a really interesting take. I didn't think of it that way. I don't think at that point I was anyway, because I just went straight to self-harm, and like she's having a moment where she wants to panic and have a reaction and she can't. And so she's engaging in sort of a grounding exercise, which unfortunately for this time period is self-harm, right? But I think that's an interesting idea of like that struggle between, because we don't know, right? Like how much of the pearl is being sort of supplemented by whoever Charlotte was, if it is at all, right? So I don't know. I like that point.
No, exactly. Just to go back to Tara's comment about casting a pregnant woman, it's interesting that they put her in a role in privileged culture. Right. In other words, yeah, we've gone diverse in privileged culture. If they show us a pregnant woman in less elitist cultures, then that'll be the true test whether or not this is Star Trek. Of course, it's Westworld, so it's not Star Trek. So next, Caleb waits with Dolores for an ambulance. She grabs his hand. He joins her in the ambulance. Then, expressing his skills as a field medic, he questions the EMT's understanding of what's happening. The police herald them to pull over. Caleb checks his night shift app and realizes there's a red rum contract out on Dolores. Caleb asks the thug-looking cops for ID. They shoot up the place. Typical humans. Fight ensues. Dolores protects herself with a scalpel. She then uses thug number one's eyes, which are still in her dead sockets, for an identification scan. Commandeers a Land Rover, warns Caleb to change his name, and says in her best bad girl voice, "You're a good man, Caleb, but the less you know about me, the better." She drives off. He looks, I don't know, happy, sad, just a plot scene.
I thought he looked stunned. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I do like the point where those two EMTs are waiting on a system to make decisions for them that they should be able to make in that moment. And I felt like that was kind of reminiscent of, maybe it's just because we're a school site, but I was like, that's kind of education, right? Like we're constantly waiting on a system to tell us when we can intervene with a student, when we clearly can see what's going on. We can clearly tell something's wrong and we can't even get to the point where we can figure that out. So it just had a lot of like, it hit me in a lot of ways about how we do that in our life. Like we sit around and wait on something else to give us permission to do what we know needs to be done.
That leads to
I think that the fact, as I say, I think the fact that Caleb saw that and he's thinking on his feet and he's like, no, you need to do this, you need to do this. And they're like, well, the machine hasn't told us X. Like, I think that just further separates him from what's happening. Like we saw that separation. You mentioned last time with the him reading the book.
Yes.
Right? Or
yes. They're working hard to separate him
not
from
technology to make his decisions.
Yeah, I think you're right. And he's also a trauma specialist, right? So there's trauma to be dealt with, and that's what he was trained. I assume that's what he was trained in the military, and he just takes over, which makes him perfect for Dolores in another way, right? In the next scene, Charlotte stands still, dripping blood into a pool. She receives a screeching voice message from no one. An assistant tells her the taker of Delos is being done by Sarek. He's a black hole, but like a black hole, we can infer his existence. His presence is known through $1 trillion negative space in the global economy. He has complete anonymity. Imagine the lengths he must have gone to achieve that.
I like the point that she made, like we can infer that this person exists by the ripples that it creates. But I like your question about like because like this is a really comprehensive system to like get yourself off the grid from, right? So like,
Yeah.
were you born in a situation where you weren't on the grid to begin with, or created in a situation where you weren't on the grid, or were you able to get yourself completely removed? But then I don't know. I got a lot of questions that I am just going to trust the writers to provide for me later.
Right.
I hope. I don't know.
Well, I absolutely fell in love with this title more and more as I watched the show. Right. So Sarek has a field. There's no absence of field for Sarek. They can infer his presence from the field of effects his actions have on the global economy. And in some of my work, what I try to argue is that this is how we know ourselves and this is how we know others. By the pattern of effects I continually generate in my world, and by the pattern of effects others generate in their world. So on the one hand, we say, I get to know you, and we think we're getting into some basic computational self that's true. But what we really know is how this person is and the things they do in the world time and time again. So I just love this idea of looking at cells as field generators. I know that's trippy, but systems that produce patterns over and over and over. And that in the end is how we're ever able to cooperate or compete or anything along those lines.
We've had this conversation, I think, multiple times, and I'm not surprised to hear you interpret this sort of, black hole analogy that they used.
Yes, no.
But I think you're right. I think it speaks to the level of influence that we have on each other. And it's interesting to be having this conversation amid a pandemic when
Lord
we feel like we're trying to reduce that influence, but it's still occurring in all these other different interesting ways, even without being physically near each other. So that's something that I think I'll continue to think about, but that's kind of my reaction.
No, that's exactly where I am comfortable going with this title, right? I mean, we're being asked to live in an absence of our normal social field. And we have a field.
And Sarek doesn't have a physical representation, right? So he's able to do all of this without physically being there. And so I think that's just interesting timing.
No, it really is, right? Charlotte receives her second screechy voicemail. She enters her apartment and is scared by her former lover, partner, husband. We're not sure. His name is Jake. She asks him how he got in. He calls her Charlie, which I don't think we've ever heard her call before, and reminds her he lived there for 8 years. She doesn't remember. He starts to question why, and she seduces him. So you see, like I said last week, seduction in order to change the subject is not a gender-specific behavior.
You're right. You're right. I backtrack.
Sex ensues. It's all going well until he tells her to be quiet or you'll wake him up. Who, she says. The sex ends. He's upset, pretty disgusted by her apparent lack of concern for their kid. She makes nice with her son. He tells her she's not his mom. I'll always love you. And he says, I want my own mommy back. Ouch.
Okay. So can I say, like, for the sake of I'm predicting Tara's moment, I'm choosing this as my moment, peace of mind, because I was watching this with my husband, and the first thing we said was, are we real? Because our son says this to us a lot. You're my new mommy.
No, you are not real, by the way.
And so it was just so trippy, but this idea of we're always constantly changing, right? In the moods that we're in, the emotions that we experience. And I'm sure to children, we kind of feel like different people whenever we're experiencing that. And so to have them portray something that I have routinely experienced with my child was so like, I had to stop and be like, oh my gosh, like that's not, I don't think this is just the child picking up on like, I don't think the child's picking up on the fact that she's the host. I think he's referring to the fact that who she was before versus whenever I guess this divorce happened or the separation or the leaving, like life changed for them. And I think that's hard for children. So I'm interested to see, particularly given what happens later, how her relationship with the son plays out, because clearly the host is, whoever it is connecting with the son, and maybe can give him back a little bit of what the son used to have with Charlotte. So anyway, that was my big moment of like, holy crap, they just painted like a time of my life that I'm currently experiencing.
Right.
So yeah. Am I real? I don't know. According to my son, I'm new mommy and old mommy's gone. So
I like it. Maybe it's when your hair's up or down, or I don't know. Who knows?
I don't know.
I'm new daddy. I listen to BTS now. So, but when I look at how I experience my parents over my own life course, their narratives for me become massively different as I go through different stages of my own life, reorganizing how I look at other people's stories. So this idea of constantly changing, I suspect you'd have to be like a young kid to really use language like new and sort of mean it, But at the same time, I mean, there's been plenty of epiphanies for me in terms of, I thought about my dad then, how I thought about him 10 years ago, how I think about him now. So this idea of constant change, and then somehow being trapped in a cage of believing we understand it, and then being disappointed later when it changes, that's almost, the human condition to some extent.
And I do think, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the fact that one of you, I can't remember because my brain is already dead, brought up the fact that like Teddy not like, he doesn't know who Dolores is anymore. Like everything changed. If this is Teddy, this is an important lesson for him to learn that people are not always going to be exactly who they were or who you thought they were. They're going to change. So it'll be interesting to watch Teddy learn this lesson, hopefully through the son or whoever Teddy is or Charlotte is. But so that's just what I was thinking, kind of linking it back to that idea of maybe Teddy's going to go through his own learning of what it means to accept people across various phases.
I guess for me, and going back to what the ex-husband or ex-partner or the man said to her about something like, you can push me out of your life, but you can't put the son out of your life. Like I had the impression that before the incident on Westworld that she was like super driven and not 100% attentive, right? Like he seemed like that's an old conversation. Like he was having the same old conversation with her again. Like you forgot him again. Like it's not something that's new or recent, but that the son hasn't been a priority.
Yeah.
Historically was kind of the sense that I got from that.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I agree. I think if there was a change, it happened early on prior to anything that happened in Westworld.
Yeah.
And the child's probably remembering a time where she didn't have as much responsibilities or
wasn't gone all the time.
Right. Or like was able to like tuck him in correctly, wasn't too busy. So I do think, we as parents think about when we get wrapped up in work or we get really busy or we're promoted or we do all of this, like, are we changing towards our kids? And I do think that happened, but I agree with you. I think it happened long before she left for Westworld. Right.
I had the same reaction the two of you did. I was excited to see a man complaining about a woman being driven and the consequences that driven has on your life.
Yeah.
And I was excited to see that. I do think as people that haven't been in a particular workforce, dare I use the word field, no pun intended, but as people move into a field who don't have an experience of ambition in that space and actually being in that space and expressing ambition, there's a whole world of experience one has to go through. And this whole idea of leaving your kids. I've had many conversations with many colleagues, most often female, who are conflicted about caregiving as opposed to career ambition. And my advice has always been, well, teach your kid how to do it then, right? Make them part of it for you instead of, no, I got to be this way with my kid and I got to be this way with work. Integrate the two into how you're with your kids. If you want your kids to go out there to be in this world, there's no better teacher than you to show them how to manage ambition. And so I was excited to see it. I agree with you, Leandra. This is a topic they need to do very well. If they're going to continue pursuing the relationship between the mom and the son, they need to handle this one well.
I agree. And as you were talking, I was thinking you were saying like, you have to learn how to integrate your children into that sort of process.
Yeah.
Would it have been great if Ford had done that with his children and the host, if the host are his children, like it would have been nice if he had done more than just give them these directives and he had involved them in So it's interesting to see. Anyway, there's just thoughts.
No, I think he was a typical male way of raising kids, right? Give them some good advice and send them out into the world and go back to being ambitious. At least that's stereotypical male. I'm not so sure it's how younger American males are carrying themselves these days, but in my generation, that was the modus operandi. All right, so Charlotte's at work. The staff is concerned because host units are missing from Westworld. Most were low-level side units. Poor Teddy, nothing but a low-level drone.
Poor baby.
And that's just how they talk about you, man. Yeah, just low-level side unit.
It made me wonder who else got snagged, right? So
yes.
They said low-level side units, and I was like, I hope she brought Hector and the snake woman. But then I was thinking, okay, go ahead, keep going.
No, you don't know. And so we get to guess, and they'll probably do the same thing with the unveiling of these pearls as they're doing with who's ever in Charlotte's head, right? They're going to make us guess and slowly reveal who it is, which is just tons of fun. The Maeve is the one that they're worried about. At least I drew that from the conversation. And they believe it was an inside job. Who's the mole? Who's been selling information to someone who's buying them out? The Pearl in Charlotte is fatigued by playing Charlotte. And that's the scene where she just turns away from the discussion and she goes and looks out the window. And you can tell the system is just drained of having to play this role. She makes another desperate call to someone. We learn in the next scene that the person she's been calling she's been calling is Dolores.
I will give kudos to the acting in that scene because you're right. Like all the emotion that actress gives as she's looking out the window. And I'm like so obsessed with Thor Ragnarok that like I had a hard time for a long time, like separating those two characters.
Right.
And I'm hoping the end result is that the combined host and Charlotte becomes more like her character Thor. But yeah, I just think it's a really good breakdown, just a really good, plot driving scene of just how much she's taking on and how exhausting that is. And so she's really dedicated to the cause and she's kind of being told to do all these things, but it catches up with you, especially when you're balancing two lives.
And one of them is terrified.
Yeah.
If it's Teddy, he has absolutely no clue where he is.
Which feels like Teddy, right? Like there's this childlikeness to the whole portrayal, the whole interaction, and it felt like when Dolores was mothering Teddy before she has to kill him, right? When he just is questioning everything and he's nervous about everything and he's so scared and she's really just trying to give him confidence and help him understand like who he is and who he could be, and he just wasn't there yet,
No, you're absolutely right. Dolores and Charlotte meet in the hotel lobby. Charlotte wants to know who she is. She reveals a bloody arm due to multiple self-inflicted wounds. Dolores chills her out through her core code, escorts her to a room and reserves two adjoining rooms. In case you have to kill me, asks Charlotte. It won't come to that, says Dolores. Obviously Teddy. Annoyed. Exactly. Is this the final clue?
This is for me. I was like, oh yeah, it's totally Teddy. And then it just gets more and more Teddy as the whole episode goes. And so when I'm so wrong next week, like I'm totally okay with the fact that because I will be righteously wrong. Like I'm at that point.
Exactly. And I think
can I ask really quickly before I continue, because I'm part of the scene will be us kind of guessing that. What happened to Dolores' dad?
I thought, did
he survive that transfer?
I don't know, but remember he was so kind of addled after when they did the whole ship. Was it season 1? I think
it was 2 because she like put a whole bunch of stuff in his head, right? I don't remember. Yeah. I just like the way that she was mothering him, but you're right. Like she is mothering Teddy too, but like kind of the way she was talking later, I was like, is this your dad? Like, I don't know. Anyway, putting that out there.
Oh my gosh.
This is just me being a conspiracy theorist because
I know. No. I thought about him too. I thought about Abernathy too. Like I ran through so many characters and tried to just but I feel confident about it being Teddy. So I will be righteously wrong next week.
It's in my mind, 95th percentile confidence interval right now that it's Teddy.
Yeah, same. I think my other 5 is on Abernathy. It's like 95 Teddy. Like,
all right.
I'm all in. I'm going home broke.
There you go. So Dolores tends to Charlotte's wounds and asks her why she hurts herself. Charlotte says Hale wants to cut into her skin and tear whoever she really is out of her head. Now, I know this sounds like pronoun salad, but I love the work they're making us do.
I loved this because to me, it showed that there's still some part of Hale's consciousness available, and there was some merging of, because and my assumption is because there was just going to be background information that Teddy was, I'm just calling it Teddy, Teddy was going to need to be Charlotte, right? And so there was some information that was maybe downloaded from the book, downloaded from the library, and merged with Teddy, and that it's still fighting. And that's so Charlotte, right? Like, that's the woman she was that we saw previously. She's like, I'm not going down without a fight.
I'm going to say.
Dolores says that, right? Like, Dolores says, like, she was always a fighter. Like, this sounds like something Hale would do. Like, even Dolores is acknowledging that, right?
And you have to be right, Tara. There has to be Charlotte code in the system. Otherwise, they have to argue it's the Charlotte body, right, that brings the Charlotte-ness to this being. And that's not been their premise at all throughout the entire show. Their argument has been that the person is in the code. So there has to be Charlotte code in the system.
That actually would explain, too, why the host doesn't remember the son, because they probably only downloaded information they got while she was in the park, or that just was deemed not necessary for the objective, right? And so pieces of it, not all of Charlotte is there. And so it's just an interesting picking and choosing what parts of Charlotte got to kind of get in on this.
It could be Dolores.
Well, it felt like it was worth Charlotte. Oh, no, go ahead. What were you saying, Sal?
I was just going to say, it could be the case of Dolores just putting in the amount of code she thinks she needs to put in to actually have Charlotte function at the Delos, right? She needs to get the host out quickly. She needs it to act like Charlotte quickly, but she does not have a Charlotte ball. So she picks Teddy because he's the most malleable of all of them, but she doesn't predict how despairing he's going to be because he's terrified. He has no clue where he is.
Although, like, if this is Teddy, I'm going to be a little frustrated that we didn't just go ahead and say this is Teddy. Like, there's so many clues that it is. Why did you not just say it? Like, why still? Or is it just supposed to be so obvious that we're supposed to know and they'll reveal it or confirm it?
No, I think they don't outright tell us, because I think Dolores is maybe trying to convince Teddy that he's not Teddy, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like she doesn't acknowledge who the marble is because she's trying to get the marble to merge with Charlotte.
That makes sense.
She doesn't need a Teddy marble after this. Like, what's she gonna do with that? Like,
I mean, he did let her down the first time around. So
he killed him the first time. So why did she? No, she doesn't need him again. What she needs is Charlotte, right?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, the thing you said about the Charlotte that was downloaded in the park. She was able to, until that moment that we see at the very opening scene with her recording the message for her son, she was able to really segment herself, right? Because Teddy didn't know there was a kid, which means in the park, she's not thinking about her kid.
Right.
No,
absolutely.
Talk about another level of double consciousness, like the working mother, right?
Within oneself.
Exactly. So like on top of, part of the working mother being like that segregation of yourself as a professional from yourself as a caregiver, which we talked a little bit about earlier.
No, well, you're so on target, because that's how we have to try to manage these things, is to create different fields. This character is really the Teddy Charlotte character is really an example of the absence of field, right? His entire world. I mean, Dolores destroyed the world that made him function, where he was a whole self, was the Westworld of old, right? Where he took care of her. But when all this other stuff started happening, the field that supported his identity just went away. And now he's in a different planet as far as he's concerned. And This is just despair. If you take a person, you put them in a large room, and you put ping pong balls over their eyes, after about 30 minutes, they start to hallucinate, right? So with the absence of a visual field, the brain just takes care of itself and fills in all kinds of stuff from dream states and memories. So
That sounds
fields,
like a fun activity to be doing in the middle of a pandemic. Let me tell you.
the ping pong ball test, right?
I may have an experiment for myself to try out later.
Let
Thank
me
you.
know how it goes, Leandra.
Please do record it, by the way, for prosperity. Dolores says, Hale was always a predator. Perhaps you've identified with her too much. They exchange sweet nothings that reveal they love each other. And we'll sit here and have a conversation about whether or not we really think Dolores loves Teddy. I mean, assured in their love. And what I love what happens here, assured in their love, Charlotte goes full on Charlotte. Informs Dolores of Sarek and the hostile takeover Delos. Charlotte mentions the mole becomes scared and starts talking in non-Charlotte voice. So it's cool that when Dolores gets her thinking Charlotte-ness, that field is there and Charlotte comes out. And when she does something that gets rid of the Charlotte field, Teddy comes out. Tell me it won't always be like this, that we'll be able to be ourselves. And Dolores assures her we will.
Which also made it feel like Teddy to me, because that was like a Teddy request and a Dolores response to a Teddy request. And there's something about this scene that's romantic in how they kind of touch each other and interact. And I felt like it was not necessarily initiated by Dolores, but Dolores felt like she kind of had to like pander and keep it going. And the whole like belong to me thing. And
yes. I'm sorry, but that was just creepy.
It really was.
You belong to me. But it was said, the affect was all I love you. But instead,
but it wasn't I love you. It wasn't
you belong to me.
I know. It was fantastic.
Oh my gosh.
She really feels like the work mom who's coming home to soothe her child and do what they need to do and blah, 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 and put him to bed and leave, right? So
yeah,
that was creepy though.
So do you guys, I agree that there could be the kind of love you might have for a lover from years ago who you've grown beyond. But nothing at all peer-like. I know there's a soft spot in her heart for those days, but she's moved on.
I mean, I guess I didn't even get that. Now that you say that, that makes sense. I took it as like, it's, and this is going to sound horrible.
No, go ahead.
I've heard, it's not me. I've heard it's the guy who takes you to dinner, right? Who you don't really like, but you got to go to dinner with him and like talk nice at dinner. I'm
not going to disagree with that.
You know what I mean?
It is. No, it totally is.
The food is delicious, and so you're like, yeah.
They're a nice guy, so like,
nice guy. Meanwhile, but you're not trying to do anything there. So, and that to me was kind of the way that interaction went. Like Teddy's obviously still in love with Dolores and willing to do what it takes. And she knows.
It's sad. It's like
she needs that.
She totally needs that.
It's like the situation you're describing. Only you need dinner.
You need dinner.
You need dinner.
A long time.
It's stage 3 Maslow at the very bottom, right? In other words, it's like doing whatever you can to feel a sense of belonging, right? And it's desperate, and we just feel. I don't know if you guys. I feel sad for Teddy. But
Tara, are you shaking your head no? I'm over here like, yes, I am. I'm so sad for him. I look up at Tara's like, no.
I didn't feel bad for him. I'm like, I don't know. I'm rooting so hard for the host that I'm like, it's part of the game.
Well,
get it together.
It was sad.
Oh, I see. Yes, I see. But you're right, because Dolores treats him like, damn, okay, what time is it? Okay, I got to get this part of my plan stabilized.
Yeah,
I'm going to sit here, spoon for a while, get this all squared away. He's chilling. Okay, now I got to go take care of this other part. Oh, damn, can't these things just stay stable long enough for me to take over the world, right?
Exactly.
Very much how I experienced her. On the next scene, Caleb checks the night shift app. He's the target. It's weird that this happens, and then he visits his mom, right? He tells her he's leaving for a while. She tells him he's a good boy, but who are you? She wants her son back.
Heartbreaking.
Okay.
I mean, it's the same thing we saw last time, right? Where like clearly she's not stable, and I think he's there to say goodbye because she's the only person he has, right?
All right. So for me, this is another example of absence of field, in the sense that her brain is no longer capable of generating the neural fields necessary to sustain memory. So when I saw that scene, it reminded me of one of my favorite novels. It's called The Echo Maker by Richard Powers. And what he does is he looks at identity as these levels of field. A guy who has Capgras syndrome, who sees his sister but can't recognize her. She tries to take care of him, but he won't recognize her as his sister. And then a famous neuroscientist who comes to help him and then loses his national reputation because he's seen as pandering. This idea that all these different levels of fields that we work to create as part of identity. I just thought that was really, really cool. And it threw me back to Maeve's little epiphany story last week where, oh gosh, I speak Italian, not French, by the way, which is what I said in the podcast. I speak Italian. I can't control Nazi minds, and Hector doesn't know who I am, right? All these different levels keep perturbing her identity. So Caleb is leaving the hospital and is approached by the dude from the Studio 54 personal job with the tweaking rich dude. Was that the same guy?
Yeah. Because he's like, we're colleagues.
Why is he speaking with a Midwestern accent now?
I don't know. I was actually going to ask you guys. Like, I didn't pause it to go back and check. I was going to ask, like, is this the same one who was like, just do what you got to do? Or is this just someone else who happens to have brown hair?
I mean, maybe it's my racism or face blindness or both. I assumed it was the same guy. And I don't know, maybe the accent, maybe he was faking the other accent in Studio 54 because it's not cool to have a Midwestern accent in Studio 50 in the nightclub scene. I don't know. No.
Or you're just in a high pressure situation. Like, I can speak from experience. My accent when I'm in a high pressure situation is very different, right? Like Appalachia comes out in different contexts versus, post elocution classes. So I think
no, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It is code switching. I mean, I have no idea, but if it is the same person, I think that's what's going on. But if it's not, it's just they got a lot of white, brown-haired guys running around killing people. So,
well, it's true in real life.
Yeah, that is a theme in this show, right? I mean, except for Stubbs.
Oh, yeah, except for Stubbs.
Exactly. Dolores asked the Sean Connery host for intel on Caleb, finds out Caleb's in trouble. The thugs hold Caleb over a ledge saying stupid thug B-movie stuff. They shock him in his mind grill, which is obviously where people have been putting these code-containing communal wafers we've been seeing, right? Yeah. They now have access to his pulse and they push it to the limit. Inadvertently, they also activate his lunch buddy. RoboFriend comes to see what's happening. Thugs push him over the side. Caleb experiences memories of sad times. Tears fall. Dolores arrives. Thugs die.
So I love the fact that when he's in distress, it activated his robot buddy. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a tender moment. It wasn't my moment, but it was definitely a tender moment. And I also like his implant. So they activated his implant because he had deactivated it. Yes. And I was curious. It's funny. In the previous episodes, I was like, I wonder where they put the implant. It's just in passing. But the bridge, the pallet is the perfect place because then if it's easy to access and anyway, I had lots of.
Also still protected because it's it's like up in your mouth. And this was actually the saddest scene I feel thus far watching him watch this robot who's really there. We assume he's there to save him. I don't know. Maybe he's just coming to help. I have no idea. But that was really sad.
I know. Same. I was like, why did
you kill that robot?
I think Tara was right. Once his heart rate went to a certain level, the robot was just checking. They'd been programmed to check to see what's going on. Yeah. Had no clue that it was going to be pushed over the edge by these thugs.
Yeah. You're right. It would be beneficial if the robot could figure out, he's hanging over a ledge dangerously and might fall, like considering their work, right?
Right. And that's a sharp contrast to the robots out of Westworld, right? Which is precisely what Ford did, was train them in Westworld for years so they wouldn't let themselves be thrown over ledges by crazy humans, right? So that's pretty cool. And also, this is when she takes him out to breakfast. This is the first example of the Midwest type behavior that I've been asking this show to show, right? In other words, there are nice people in this world, and I'm glad that Dolores ran into him. Well, I'll wait for comments when we actually get to that scene. But I love the fact that I wrote, this is the Midwestern type of behavior I was hoping we'd see. Charlotte goes to work. A colleague sends her the complete video from the last night in Westworld, in which she apologizes for not being there for Nathan.
So I love this because I feel like we get to see a side of Charlotte that I do think is going to be closer in line with Teddy than the other side of Charlotte. So I think this is going to make it easier for Teddy to integrate with what he has with Charlotte, right? The other thing is that whole, like, she starts singing "You Are My Sunshine" at this point, right?
Yeah. You sure? Okay, I thought it was at the end.
This is when she's recording and she's like,
she starts singing. Yeah. Like, how many, like, I know, like, that was my mother's song to me. It's what she sings with the grandkids. Like, lots of moms sing this, like, "You Are My Sunshine." But y'all, that song is actually really sad. It's about a guy losing his wife to someone else. And so I'm just like, why does everyone pick this song? As they're like, anyway.
Right.
So I just thought it was very sweet and, like, a very relatable moment.
And right? We sing those kind of songs to children because the melodies are so soothing and calming. And
I just have to point out that song is sad, and I don't know why anyone be singing it to their kids.
Fair enough. I mean, they should just hum Mozart as far as I'm concerned. But
I mean, there are plenty of Pink Floyd songs that are way more friendly and happy than that. Okay,
please. There are no Pink Floyd songs that are happy.
Yes, there are. We can have that argument later. We can have that argument later on a different podcast.
Wish you were here. I'll give you that one.
Yeah. Learning to fly. That's optimistic. They learn to fly.
Fair enough. Anyway, okay.
Point is, I think it's awesome, but it is scary. It's sketchy.
I gotcha.
Well, I think the tenderness piece, like we said, is that tender piece is gonna connect to Teddy, right? Like, Teddy's a singing "You Are My Sunshine" kind of MFer, like he gets that. That's part of his core drive, that closeness and love. So I think that's good. I did like the fact that and stop me if I'm jumbling scenes, that was the key. That was the passcode.
Yeah, that comes out later. But no, it actually does what gets her to Sarek.
Yeah.
Which is really just cool how they played that scene out.
And shows that her connection to her son is much deeper than what we knew. Yeah.
Yeah, and believe me, there are plenty of guys who live their life trying to make it, who have epiphanies on their deathbed about spending more time with their kids. Right? So in other words, what's that?
I said the cat's in the cradle. There's a whole song about that.
Exactly. Yeah. So Charlotte receives another screechy phone call. There's nobody home. She meets her son in a creepy dog petting situation with the guy Nathan told her about. She is super nice. She sends Nathan off with the dog. "Nice of you to turn the cameras off for me," she says as she grabs his throat. "He's a pedophile, perhaps under surveillance due to previous crimes." That's the instant inference I made. You guys similar? Okay. There are lots of things you can go ahead. "There are lots of things you can fake in this world. Most people don't want you to see the predator inside. You want to know a secret, Thomas? You helped me today. I really should thank you. Seeing you with Nathan, seeing you touch his little hand, he reminded me of something." He says, "Let me go." She says, "I would, but the harder I squeeze, the more I remember. I remember what it's like to be me. You're not the only predator here." He's dead. She walks away smiling with the dog, of course. Do I hear "In the Jungle, the Mighty Jungle"?
Yes. Okay. So this is actually the only time that I hesitated as to whether or not this is Teddy, because I would have never seen Teddy as a predator. But I do think, given what Teddy has been forced to experience with Dolores over and over and over again, if something were going to bring out the gunslinger in Teddy, it's going to be someone taking advantage of an innocent.
Yes.
Because remember back in season 1, Teddy would always try to shoot or fight off the guys who were about to go rape Dolores, right? Yes. And he would get so furious and be unsuccessful every single time. And so I was like, yes, this is the same Teddy that tries to fight off the guys who always want to go and rape and pillage and take advantage.
Yeah.
I think you guys are totally on target. And I love this scene because the continuing squeezing of the guy's neck is like a catalyst for the total fusion of Teddy's defender motif and Charlotte's predator motif, right? And interestingly enough, Teddy has killed people you know what I mean by that. Whereas Charlotte's been, at least from what we know, a metaphorical predator. But what's happened now is she is actually a true killer in the realest sense of the term, and she likes it.
I will say this is the only time where I was like, maybe it's the Man in Black. Like, that's a very Man in Black thing to do. Like that phrasing, but it can't. Like, it just can't be. Like, because I don't think the Man in Black would have. No, I just don't think that's what would happen. But it is a very similar going down that path for a different reason, right? Like, I don't know.
Well, and he wouldn't have a marble. That's the other thing, right? Is
that we know of, right? Because we still haven't seen him since we saw his daughter giving him an integrity check. So, like,
true.
No, I absolutely love this scene, and I just loved how it played out. As Charlotte Teddy became more and more enraged, and the squeezing and the killing added to the rage, those two just became one. What I'm a little surprised by is that Dolores relied on the world to make that happen, right?
But I think it had to happen organically, right? And I think I think Dolores believes so firmly that humanity is so terrible that experience was going to happen. Right. And it did, right? I don't think she knew what it would look like or how it would unfold, but eventually, like, humans are going to show themselves. And that was going to be, I don't know that she knew it was going to, like, mesh them together as well as it meshed them together, but I think she knew it was going to happen.
Well, she's just lucky no one took Charlotte out to breakfast, right? That's a joke, guys. I mean, if someone had been nice to Charlotte and take her out to breakfast.
No, that's true.
You know, that fusion wouldn't have happened. The fusion Go ahead.
I just don't know. I think Charlotte's also dealing with a lot. Like, she's this mastermind who has all these moving pieces. And so I think there's also part of her who was kind of like, man, I don't have the time. I got Bernard over here. Just got to cut him loose. Just hope he does his part. I got Teddy over here. Like, I don't have time. Like, I just hope it happens. Right. So she's got a lot of things that she's got moving on. I don't know that it even would have occurred to her to stop and try to do that because she didn't have time for that. Like, she's on the move. Like, so I think there's lots of fires that she's intentionally letting burn out on their own because she has to.
No, I think that goes back to what Tara said. Dolores is just going to rely on the world to have them get fused because given what she does, she's going to run in a situation where violence is necessary and someone needs to be defended.
And she's not wrong. She's not wrong.
I just love that scene. So Dolores and Caleb try to have breakfast. Dolores strips through his memory borders just like she did with the rich German guy in the first episode. Caleb knows his information is being tracked, just like we know we're being tracked when we use Facebook. But when he discovers his most intimate moments have been recorded and distributed, he feels rage, just like we did when we discovered Facebook had been selling our information for years.
Yes.
She sheepishly offers up, "You're angry," just like Soderbergh at a congressional hearing. "No," he says, "I'm enraged," as we were. Dolores says, I know the feeling. I say, "Dolores, so do we." She then describes Rehoboam, how it was collecting all of their data before there were privacy laws. Sounds familiar. Dolores says, creating a mirror world of this world to make a composite of you and everyone so that they can control who they will let you become.
That's my moment.
Go ahead.
In the diner, and then she expands on it on the bridge, right?
Yes, yes.
Like, they know who they're going to let you become essentially from birth. Like, they have made this determination. And I was like, and that is so, it's what we're doing now. We're just not using an algorithm, right? Like, we know who we will let children become very early on. You know, you hear things like governments building prisons based on third grade reading scores instead of adding additional teachers to the workforce based
Right.
on third grade reading scores,
Right.
or improving vocational programs based on third grade reading score. We're like, they're putting kids in jail, and they're like, okay, you failed this test, let's put you in jail. And so that was so, I don't know, that moment was just so salient for me. Like, it was so real, because I was like, here we are.
Yeah.
Like, oh, go ahead, Tara. Go ahead, Leandra.
No, I was just agreeing. I felt like as I was watching that scene, I was like, oh, this is everything that psychologists are trying to, when we talk about equity and social justice and all these systems that are in place that oppress and marginalize various people, whether it's jail or reading access or access to mental health or healthcare, like we push people down paths and they don't have a way to get off. And so it's a lot of the work that we do. And so it was interesting to see it put out in such a simple way, right? Oh, we have an algorithm that does it. It's not us, it's an algorithm. But
yes,
I don't understand, and I've said this before in another, I don't understand how people can watch this and not walk away and say, we do that. And it's not okay. So it's not okay for Rehoboam to do it, but it's okay for us to do it as a society.
Absolutely.
And so I just feel like I'm looking forward to the show showing that more and more and more. So I can continue to bring it up in my social justice trainings as another example of what this looks like, right?
But do you think people will get it? And that's my question, is like, we do it in schools, we do it with the police, we do it with, healthcare. I was reading these articles this week about, just implicit bias in healthcare and how that's killing people right now, right? With folks making these racist and classist decisions about who needs a ventilator and who doesn't need a ventilator, right? Like, we just do it in every area. And I hope, I guess this podcast will help, but I hope people also just like take a step back and just see what we're doing.
So I hope so. It reminds me of the writer, I can't remember the name, and I'm kicking myself that I don't, but he was talking about watching Dumbo as a child and everyone being on Dumbo's side, all the bullies being on Dumbo's side, watching what Dumbo's going through, and him being like, how do you not get that you're the other people?
Right.
Like, how do you not get that you're the bully? But you can see it. And so I think you're right, Tara. I think there is a degree of like, if people were more able to take that perspective and apply it and get that nuance, maybe we would have better impact of these kind of stories.
Well, these stories like Westworld, and I would also argue Watchmen, they're designed to be entertaining, but they're also cracking an American individualist code. The insidiousness of contemporary or racism in the United States is that very few or a very small percentage of the population is consciously racist, right? And so when we take the concept racism and we act like it's an individual type of thought structure that then leads to action, everybody gets to say, I'm not racist because I don't feel that way. But what we don't look at, like when I talk to my students, I say, the issue isn't what's in your head. The issue is, what do you keep the same in the world because you're here? What are the things that stay in the same in the world every day because of how you live your life? Stop talking about racism as an internal issue and look at it, dare I say, as a field X that your existence perpetuates every day.
It is a field. They're also not anti-racist. That's always my response to that. It's like, you may not be racist, but you're not anti-racist, right?
No.
You're not tearing it down. You're not taking it apart.
And that Martin Luther King and those letters, I always put it up to students because I usually teach primarily white females. And I'm always like, lukewarm acceptance is more bewildering than outright hate, right? And so like this sort of lukewarm, like armchair liberalism or what have you, like I agree. And I think Dolores is about to blow all that up. And I'm excited about it.
There you go. Dolores then takes him to where she says he will eventually commit suicide. She gives him the deets on his past behavior and how it all leads to that horrible moment. She reveals the lie behind working hard to get ahead. By the way, I got to say, that's one fine coat she's wearing. Do you guys remember that coat she was wearing? You don't? Okay. Well, I won't make any more. I will not make any more clothing comments.
Yes, the black leather jacket.
Oh my God.
Beautiful.
That was stunning.
I love the clothes. I love the look.
I was honestly looking at her hair. I always look at that. I don't know. And like, just like the start, like she starts off with this loose bun, half up, half down, girl next door look. And now she's this very
sleek cut.
Yeah, very sleek, very severe, very, I mean, business. Like, it's very practical the way she has it pulled back. Yeah, she's learned a lot.
Very face forward, right? Nothing in the way of her face. Then there's just this great line: before the system, a man like you might have had a chance. Work hard, keep striving. You'll never be more than a construction worker or a petty criminal, because that's all they'll let you be. They
So
won't. Go ahead.
I paused when she showed him his tablet. And I was like, yes. Like, I don't know. Like, this whole exchange, for me, I was like slow clapping and thanking the writers for like telling the truth, and then hoping people can see how true this piece of it is.
Yes. Well, again, there's nothing in most people's daily lives to check this, right? Most people are doing, like you said, culture protectors, right? They're not. We try to put words like good and bad on it. The problem is that makes the issue too simple. I'm just getting up every day, going to work. I love my kids. I love my neighbors. I go to whatever I go to. I like the people there. So there's no dissonance in my life. What we don't understand is that the problems for others are generated at a larger field, at a larger scale. And so our whole culture is organized to keep the suffering of those others out of my immediate life. And I don't have to do empathy work at all, because it's not in my immediate life. It's over there, right? And the kind of stuff we talk about here, the current movement to make the culture more woke, all of this is to try to connect those fields, to make people in this space live in this space, aware of the suffering they're living in this space is generating over in that space. And man, we have a very tough individualist nut to crack in this culture. When people surround themselves with programs and such that just validate my narrative, they don't provoke it. So I'm sorry, I blathered there.
No, it's good. Solid.
And I love the last line there. They won't invest in someone who's going to kill himself, but by not investing, they ensure the outcome. All right. I can hear.
I was like standing and clapping in front of my couch, right? Like, I mean, for me, this week, it was the ventilators. I ended up writing letters about the fact that certain states have said that if you have an intellectual disability, you're not eligible for a ventilator with COVID.
Lord.
And I was like, they won't invest, right? And what they think won't
pay off for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've been doing this for centuries, right? Like, the people who can't, quote unquote, contribute enough, we just don't invest in. And and I knew, like, this was really the moment, I think, too, where I looked at Adam and I'm like, I need to take a walk. And I just feel like it's something that I think we struggle with. And yeah, I don't know. I think this is one of those things where I use a lot of pop culture in my classes, and I will be taking the scene and playing it over and over again until someone gets it. Like, it just...
Ooh, Leander, that's such a good idea.
No, yeah, I love pulling this stuff and, like, just kind of saying, like, if this makes sense to you, why doesn't this other example make sense to you, right? We've been sterilizing children with intellectual disabilities. Indigenous populations have been sterilized, but we've been doing this over and over again for the sake of the American dream, so that some people will have the opportunity to work hard and get there. It's just
not even the American dream, the global dream, right? Didn't a French doctor say this week that we should test the COVID vaccines on these poor African communities?
Yes, I did see that. Yep.
Madness.
Where there's only like 200 cases in the whole damn continent.
I know.
We're going to go there to test it. Yeah.
There was another bit in this scene where there's another aspect of this line that really resonated with me. Before the system, a man like you might have had a chance, work hard, keep striving. There was a period post-World War II in this country where the middle class did get its piece, and it was called the union system. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it was in the 80s when President Reagan fired PATCO, which is the Air Traffic Controllers Union, which was the #1 union in the country. That's when we started to see unions fall off in this country, coupled with automation and purchasing of moving businesses overseas and stuff. But my point is, for the past 30, 40 years, we've been decimating the field, i.e. the union system, that actually afforded the opportunity for the American middle class to get its piece, right? And now it doesn't get its piece. And the irony, just for me, the terrifying irony of now is that those people that were displaced by the union system have come to buy into this individualistic way of viewing things that's non-field oriented, right? And blaming women and minorities for the fact that they don't have those kind of paying jobs like they used to. And it's not women and minorities that did this. It's a small percentage of the population that's actually able to control goods and services and control our capital. And again, I pay very close attention to this stuff. And for the past 30 years, our government has given up more and more control of this culture capital and given it to private industry. And this is writ large in the thing we're going through right now, where the President of the United States says, oh, those aren't your ventilators, those are our ventilators. Those ventilators are ours. What the hell does ours mean if you're the federal government? Just the arrogance, and to actually dismantle yourself from, I would argue, a proud history of the American union system and pretend like you're not connected is, for me, terrifying, just terrifying.
Amen. Amen.
Dolores claims they're a lot alike. They put you in a cage just like they did me. Why didn't you tell those men about me? They were going to kill you. You surprised me. You made a choice no one else in your shoes would have made. But did he surprise you guys?
No.
No.
I mean, she already showed the tablet. He's suicidal. Like he's already resigned to the fact, or he has the risk of, I guess, he has depression. Like we've been seeing over the last 2 episodes, like he's in a position where I think he's willing to go out for a good reason. He's tired and he's not going to give up the one thing that he seems to have connected with for that. Well, I also think they just pissed him off, right? You kill him a damn robot. Like, you pissed me off.
That was going to be I mean, he has nothing to lose. Like, he did connect with Dolores, but I think he also has nothing to lose. And so, getting killed, protecting this, like, so what, right? Like, what's he got going on anyway?
There is no momentum in his life moving him to sustain his connection in the system, right? Exactly. It's all going the other way. And it doesn't surprise me that he also is a person who was a field medic, right? I think people who actually deal with trauma, it's a little more difficult for them to disconnect themselves from the suffering of others. Just because they've dealt with it, they've seen it, they lived it. And their whole worldview is sort of, the trauma is in the worldview. It's not what they're thinking about all the time, but they do see the world through the eyes of suffering. So it doesn't surprise me that character ended up being built that way. I'd love to see if they actually reverse engineered this character, right? In other words, okay, we need a guy, at least one decent guy that the robots like, right? Okay, what is it going to take for Dolores to like someone? Oh, well, he's got an empathy. Oh, he's got to understand trauma. All these things. And let's make him Caleb, right? In other words, I'd love to see how they built the pieces of who this guy has to be.
And he would have to be willing to die for her, I think, is the other piece of that. Like, he would have to be put in a situation where he was willing to sacrifice himself or something extremely, important, whatever. Like, she would have to see that, because no one's done that for her. Even Teddy, she had to kill, right? So like, or, I don't know, however you want to interpret that. And so I think in that moment, I also will say, going back to the idea that like, he's just mad, right? Like, he's just mad at the whole thing. I don't think, even though he acts shocked when Dolores tells him all the information she has, I already think he knew. I think he already suspected that the game was rigged, that this is where he's going to end up. Like, the way he reacts after that phone call about the job, like, I think deep down he already knew. And it was
I think he knew it was rigged, but I don't think he knew it was going to end in his suicide, right? And I don't know.
Well, that would be.
And I guess I don't think he anticipated that it was rigged to the extent that it's rigged. Like seeing like no children not recommended, marriage not recommended, like.
Yes.
Seeing like those details, whereas, like he might have been trying to date at some point and like, man, why can't this stick? The computer's already decided these things.
No, exactly. He's checking out. Then she says, do you want to choose to join my revolution? And I love this next line. You used to cut the cable at work to see how people would react. So what? Now we know why his name is Caleb, right? And cutting the cable is a metaphor for cutting himself from the system to make himself Caleb, right? He's creating an absence of field. He's actively creating his disconnection from the larger field. It's just brilliant. And I've talked enough to have had a peace of mind. So what I'm going to talk about now is I'm going to propose a dark loop saying of the week here. And I'm actually going to steal it from Dr. Martin Luther King from his 1963 letter from a Birmingham jail, which, Leandra, I'm not sure if that's the piece you referenced.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
But
one of.
Just, so I'm going to quote this. And as I quote it, just think about the idea of absence of field, right? So injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I think Martin Luther King knew about field, y'all, right? I mean, that was the point. Trying to teach the American public in the 60s, you are all connected. And the more hateful you act, the more hateful you'll make the world. And you can't escape it, right? We get to pretend we escape it through privilege or through just ignoring others, right? But in the end, it's all there and you can't escape it. Comments? Cool. All right. So the next scene, Charlotte watches a complete video from the last night in Westworld. She watches herself sing "You Are My Sunshine" all the way through. And then she recognizes the tune from her screechy phone messages. She gets into a car, plays the tune on her phone, and calls the last number. Smart car is overtaken and drives her to Sarek's place. Charlotte was the mole.
Bum, bum, bum. That was my big thing where I was like, oh,
I was like, of course Charlotte was the mole. Like
part of me felt like I should have known that. Like thinking back to like her whole, like, I have to leave here with this data. Like she definitely had.
Yeah.
It was like more than just like, I'm a dayless employee and I need to protect assets. It was like, no, like I'm leaving with this. So a lot of things clicked for me there, but I still was shocked, which is why I love this show. Even if you see it coming, you're still shocked.
Exactly. Sarek wants all the data on all the Delos guests. Charlotte is now fully Charlotte. She keeps Sarek at bay when she says, sadly, you are better informed than I am. And that's, I think, when he told her he knew about Dolores, and she knew about Dolores. She just is full on Charlotte now, lying smooth as silk. And now we know that Dolores has a mole in Sarek's world. Right. In other words, you can see Charlotte's a double agent, but she's not the same Charlotte she was prior to Westworld. So now she gets to be Dolores's mole instead of Sarek's mole. So awesome. So any final thoughts on this episode?
I wanted to see what you guys thought about why they put glasses on her.
So that she could see him.
Oh,
he was a hologram. And they were the same glasses that that Dolores used in the first episode.
Got it. All right.
See his dead wife.
Exactly.
Got it. I really could not understand what was happening when that happened. But I
actually didn't get it till the end of the scene when he vanished. And then I didn't connect the dots at that moment. When I watched it the second time and she puts him on and I knew he was going to vanish, that's when I got it. So,
well, for me, what was complicated is why didn't he do that with Maeve? Because remember, Maeve goes to stab him and he like frees all motor functions. So he could have made himself a hologram and interacting with Maeve.
I think he wanted to put her, I think he wanted to quote unquote, put her in her place harshly.
Okay.
And he's not going to vanish. I'm going to stop your arm here. I mean, it's very embodied and very, very invasive, right? It's just, and I'm sure that when we see her again, and she talks about that scene.
She's going to be furious.
She is. And Sarek's in trouble, man. Let's just make it clear.
Yeah. He did not make a friend in that at all.
Not at all. So we do have a few small bits of listener feedback, not so much questions, but comments. As you remember, during last week's podcast, we all made shout outs to our favorite podcasts. A couple of the sisters from the podcast I listened to wrote into us. So Sister K wrote after I posted episode 2. She wrote, woohoo, I was just going to ask about the second episode. I really love the podcast and the insights you guys bring. And I love the things y'all say that I didn't even think about. So kudos to you guys. And thank you very much, Sister K.
Yeah, thank you. High praise.
Thank you.
And then Sister J, who wrote in, says, thank you for the shout out, Scotty. And that's what they call me. And I agree with your comments about Maeve's clothing and the overall architecture of that town in episode 2. It was amazing that all the places in World War II are actual places and not scenery made on a backlot. I agree completely. I so enjoyed seeing that. I guess it was a Spanish castle, not an Italian castle. It was just fun to experience.
But authentic. Like they're going out of their way to make this an authentic experience for everybody, you know?
Well, I think they filmed most of it in Spain, right? Because that whole Delos,
that's right.
That's in Spain too.
Yes. And then a guy named Tim posted on the YouTube page, great video, keep it up. All right. So for parting comments, Leandra, Tara, please tell the listeners where they can find you on social media.
You can find me on, this is Leandra. You can find me on Twitter at Paris Leandra, at PARRISLEANDRA.
And this is Tara. You can find me on Twitter at TC Raines or AINES2. You
can find me on Twitter at Jordan Jamparty, JORDANJAMPARTY. You can find all the episodes of Dark Loops Westworld on YouTube at the Dark Loops Productions channel. If you'd like to leave feedback about this podcast or about episode 4 of Westworld Season 3, leave it below on this YouTube channel or send a message to darkloopsproductions@gmail.com. darkloopsproductions@gmail.com. We'll be sure to read it at the end of our next podcast. So there it is. From all of us to all of you, remember, generate good fields. Bye-bye.
Bye.